everyone, welcome to episode 25 of Fridays with FEMA. I'm Janisha.
I'm Ashish.
So today we're going to discuss about import and export regulations. In particular, one issue that we are commonly seeing a lot of clients face. So just to take a step back, import and export transactions are a classic example of current account transactions. If you go back to our earlier episodes where we spoke about what is a capital and current account transaction. I think one very common scenario that we keep coming across in import-export context is a tripartite arrangement.
Yeah.
So there might be a situation where a party in India who is importing products from outside India wants to make the payment to a third party. That third party may be in India, a third party may be outside India. That's the arrangement that the parties commercially want to enter into. Similarly, a person in India, if they're exporting products outside India, the buyer of the goods may want to make the payment through a third party, right? They may nominate a third party to make the payment directly to the exporter in India.
Mm-hmm.
So these tripartite arrangements are becoming quite common, and very common question that comes up is it permissible under FEMA, right? So Ashish, I think let's give a background in terms of so the import-export regulations have just undergone a change. Significant simplification in Jan 2026 compared to the earlier regime that was there, right? So I think just to give a background, I think we had export regulations in place. Import regulations, there were no such import regulations. It simply came from the current account transaction.
Though we had a master direction.
Yes, but we've always had master directions on import and master directions on export, right?
But no regulation specifically for imports, only for exports.
Yeah. Today we have regulations for import and exports consolidated together, and we continue to have master directions on import and master directions on export. For those of you who are new, master directions are circulars and directions given by the RBI to authorized dealer banks to assist them in implementing the regulations, and hence it's of importance even to us as practitioners, right? So Ashish, I think going back to the old law, right? What was the law when it came to third-party payments?
So under the export regulations in the earlier law, which technically today is also the law because the new regs only come into play in October.
I think another important point is the new regs only come into effect in October.
So basically the current law provides that in case of export of goods or software, a third party payment is allowed.
The previous law,
So basically if you are exporting goods or software, then third party payments can be allowed. Now if you read this with the master direction on exports, then there are a host of conditions that you need to fulfill. For example, the bona fides need to be there, tripartite agreement, firm irrevocable order needs to be there, and there are a bunch of other conditions. But what is interesting to note is that under the export master directions, the erstwhile master directions on exports, there is no distinction that has been made between goods, software or services. While the regulation talks about goods and software only, the master direction actually does not make a mention of either goods or service or software. Now that one could think that the conclusion drawn there could be that even for services there is a third party payment that is technically allowed because the master direction provides for that.
I mean the master direction is
silent on that, right? But see, the way we need to interpret the regulation and the master directions is that regulations is the law, right? And the master directions, like you mentioned, is a direction to the AD bank to implement the regulation. So if the regulation does not cover for something, then can we really say that the master direction is going beyond that and trying to cover for what is not covered in the regulation? To my mind, the answer is no, and we have to look at the regulations and see that only goods and software a third party payment is allowed, and therefore for under that you would read the directions also accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've discussed in the past too, why would the law make this distinction, at least under the previous regime, with respect to allowing third party payments for goods and software but not for services? And well, of course we do not really know for sure why the distinction is there. Presumably it might be there because goods and software are subject to reporting requirements.
Yeah.
Right, so there is discretion to ensure that the bona fides of the transaction, or there is oversight by the AD banks to ensure that the bona fides of the transaction are being preserved and when there are third party transactions being made, whereas that's going to be very difficult in an export of service situation. There is really no IPDMS entry or anything of that sort that you're creating, and literally you have to produce the invoice to AD bank and get the money. So there is really no way for oversight to be extended, so perhaps that might have been a reason for this distinction. Right, and interestingly, under the previous master's directions before 2026, right, as Ashish mentioned, it said that the master directions on export said third party payments for both
export
and import both are permitted, but the master direction on import only specified import of goods, right? So very unclear, why does the export master direction provide for third party payments for export and import both, and the import master directions was limited to permit third party payments for import of goods, right? And as we said that previously, there was no specific regulation like it was for third party for exports, that you had for imports, right? So one interpretation could be that it's only the master direction that we need to look at, and so if you look at the master direction for imports only, then it limited the third party payments to import of goods. That's it. Though it's very unclear as to why the export master directions also provides for both. So that's one inconsistency.
Interestingly, this inconsistency remains even
it remains even today.
Yeah, in the master directions under the new 2026 master directions, again for export and import. Export provides for both export and import, but the import only covers for
import of goods.
Yeah.
In particular. So
correct.
Yeah. And this is made very interesting when we talk about now the new change in law. So in the 2026 regulations on import and export, now it's very clearly saying that third party payments, whether for import or whether for export, is permitted subject to the AD bank being satisfied of the bona fides.
Correct.
Now this is in stark contrast to what you had in the regulations for export regulations previously, where it limited third party payments to software and goods only,
yes.
Right? So now it's been liberalized in that sense. However, as we said, that if you read the master directions on import even today, it only talks about...
In fact, it's restricting even further from what it was earlier, where it is now only saying import of goods.
Which is a little... so it's a little messed up in that sense, but I think to sum and substance of it is, after 2026, while of course the law is going to get implemented in October 2026, I think under the new amended regulations, third party payouts for both import and exports are permitted, irrespective of whether it's for goods, services, software. However, because the master directions for the import leg are slightly restricted even today,
only for goods,
because it's talking only about third party payments for import of goods, it remains to be seen how the banks are going to implement it in light of the new law, which does not have such a restriction. So
and what do the master direction on export say?
It says the same thing as it previously said. So I think with that,
I think it will be interesting to see how particular situations are looked at. See, for services, normally we have not seen people doing a third party arrangement, but it will be interesting to see if people want to do a third party arrangement and how that is going to practically work out under the new law.
Because even under the new law, the AD bank needs to be satisfied with the bona fides.
Correct.
So how are we really going to show that?
Absolutely.
What paperwork is being requested for that? That will be interesting to look at. And I think sum and substance, just so that we are clear, new law widens the ambit of third party payments, technically permitted for everything, goods, service, software, for both export leg, import leg. Slight glitch, the import master directions restricted to goods only.
Yeah.
So I think that's the sum and substance of it. I think with that we can stop here for today's session, and see you guys next week on another topic. Have a good weekend till then.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.